I would like to enter bakeries and not see moldy products. I would like to buy home a loaf of bread and not feel like it's stale. Okay. So I am your regular consumer that expect two things from all the bakers out there: fresh product that is food safe. Okay. So I feel like it's our customers' right to receive those products for you. How you distribute it and your channel is entirely up to you. But it's your responsibility to make sure that when they get the product onto their tables, it's soft and it's mold-free. So this is a concern I would like to address today. All right, because some of us are just not doing that, right? Okay, so how do you do that? So first thing you need to do is go to our Academy page and download this paper on staling and baked goods. And this, I have Lallemand to thank because they supported this research and writing on this particular product. And of course, they do have enzyme solutions for you, and microbial solutions too, I believe. And you need to make sure that you get this information and really make the adjustments to make sure that your product has a longer shelf life. All right, two things that we are going to focus on today are texture and what we need to do to make the product soft and flexible, okay, and mold. So how do you keep mold from entering your product, and how to remain mold free? Sometimes up to 30 days. Yes, it's possible. All right. What do you need for better texture? Mark, you want to take a stab at this?
Sure. When you want to look at things independently and within the whole system. And so these are some of the key points in ingredients and processing that you're going to want to look at. Fats, first of all, there is such a huge variety of fats available in the marketplace today. Everything from different types of oils to different types of what we call solid fats. And I say different because people will sometimes choose different things because of different halos or things that are associated with it. There might be a trend or something, or say if you're in the Middle East and there's a big avocado grove or something, that avocado oil is popular, right? Well, then you need to look at what is the composition of this oil and how is it going to affect your shelf life? Because avocado oil, like olive oil and similar type of high-fat vegetable plants, are very high in saturated fat. So saturated fat is the fat that goes hard, but it's also the fat that stays fresh longer. It has a longer shelf life. It has what the fat scientists call better oxidative stability, OSI, right? When you get into some of the other more common fats, like say things, and people are looking to do something that is like, say, canola that is healthier, or sesame seed because of the flavor, or if you're really doing high end and you want to use things like walnut or hazelnut oil, these are very high in polyunsaturated fats. This means that there are a lot of sites for oxidation. Everything in the world is made up of molecules, and so fat is just like everything else, and it has these carbon chains, and depending on the length of the chain and how many connections have double bonds that will allow oxidation, that is where you have the risk of things going rancid. So fats can go rancid. And if you have fats that don't go rancid and get a little bit firmer, like even dairy butter. I know we had one viewer mention that they're vegan. So there's alternatives to dairy. There's margarines and shortenings and that. Some are being marketed as plant butter. There's still margarines and spreads and shortenings. They're just marketing it with a different name. They are then formulated to represent the similar type of fat composition as a butter or something like that. So along with fats, or if fats need to be omitted for some reason, emulsifiers are really important, right? Emulsifiers work best together with fats. So the general rule of thumb is that based on your fat amount, you want to use roughly 4% emulsifier, whether that's lecithin or monodiglycerides. There are no restrictions with these other than your pocketbook and the end result, right? So you want to have a good result, and you don't want to have to use more than necessary, right? And soy lecithin, canola lecithin, or also called rape lecithin, and sunflower lecithin is very popular and getting harder and harder to purchase because of its popularity. Are really good. They're very effective in this way. They're very clean label because they're plant sourced and things like that. Monodiglycerides are excellent. They are quite natural. They're extracted from fats. They don't fit well into the clean label universe because of the sound of the name. As people say, they say it's not a pantry recognizable ingredient. So, at the same time, be aware of who you're selling to, that you choose the right systems. Right? Sugars are humectants. They help trap moisture. They reduce your water activity and keep things nice and moist and mastication, like this nice soft chew and things like that. If you think of your typical supermarket family sliced white bread, if it didn't have the amount of sugar it has in it, it would not last a day or two on the shelf. And you need that sugar to really help prevent that staling and keep it really nice and soft, right? Enzymes is the modern, it's been used a lot for ages, a lot of times not being scientifically classified or things of today. The past 50, 60 years, they've been a huge help, right? And more in the foreground these days is along with a clean label again, because enzymes is something, even though it has a Z in it, and a Y, it's one of those exceptions, right? But people recognize what an enzyme is, so they're considered clean label. Even though they may not remember from high school science, but it's a recognizable name to them, right? And so enzymes perform many different functions, so you have to choose the right enzyme for its functionality. And they're working with a company like, Dr. Lin mentioned, Lallemand has a lot of products available. You don't have to necessarily give them all your secrets, but if you do help them with your formula and your objective, they can much faster recommend the right enzyme and the amount to drop in. It saves you having to do all kinds of lengthy trials, and you'll get excellent results. It may be something as just like a protease enzyme that helps relax the dough and give the gluten a little more extensibility and keep it softer after baking so that it doesn't stale as quick. Right? And then in processing, these are important not to ignore. First of all, most importantly, hydration. Good hydration is always key. And we have so many people from all over the globe here, and your wheat flours are sourced from very different regions. Some of your wheat may be sourced locally, relatively locally within country. Others may be importing it, or maybe importing the wheat and having to just grind whatever they happen to get in on that boat, and they don't have much grist blending to be able to do. So be aware of the things, as we've talked about in other seminars, and that the the certificate of analysis and sort of the quality of the protein, how much starch damage is there, these types of things to ensure you get good hydration, not only the amount of water, but the length of time the gluten needs to hydrate. We must always remember when we make dough that the starch in the dough picks up very, very little water at all. All it does is bind it in the oven primarily. What is picking up the water in the dough processing is the gluten, it's the protein. And so you give that the chance to hydrate, then you get better results going forward that way. And sponge and dough, of course, helps facilitate that. Sponge and dough also helps facilitate natural enzyme activity that is inherent in the wheat, and can sometimes be added to certain yeasts. And you get that activity, and it provides you some of that enzyme functionality naturally. Now, not everyone has the space or the scheduling available to do sponge and dough, because when you do sponge and dough, you want to do at minimum a 4-hour pre-ferment, at bare minimum. And so if you're a larger bakery, this requires separate, pre-ferment rooms for the troughs and everything to go into that are constantly, going in there. And then at the end of every 4 hours, another trough comes out and goes to processing and stuff. So these are some of the key things, and these produce your softer textures and your reduce staling and softness, and even also help, of course, also, as I said, with rancidity. Shall I talk about the buns a little bit here?
Yeah. Why don't you? This is a great time to talk about.
Because another sort of, we'll talk about more as we get into the molds. But another thing we did here is our friends in the Netherlands, Top Taste, have sent me some more of their crispy fried onions, and I'm just going to turn my background off here for a second, and just so that I can show you the buns easier. And so I'm going to show you here, these are brioche buns. These are pretty standard brioche buns. And so I'll show you this one first quickly. And this is, these are 3-ounce buns. And they are both made identical recipe, the identical ingredients, salt, sugar, butter, yeast, milk, some egg, and flour, all-purpose wheat flour. The only difference is that one of these was made with sponge and dough, and the others was made in the direct method. And so we have here, the smaller bun is the one that was made in the direct method. So you could see we got less extensibility from the gluten, we got less gassing power from the yeast. And when I break this open, you can see, I'm trying to get really close. As I break it, you see how it kind of crumbles apart? And I can feel with my finger, it's getting really firm and kind of stale, right? See, it's crumbling down there quite easily, right? And so if I take the sponge and dough one, it compresses first. You can see how much my fingers had to indent it before I could start. And now you see it bends nicely and starts to break apart, and we get a much nicer break. Now, I know we don't usually serve buns like this, but you could see it's nice and soft. We don't have nearly as much crumbs falling down. And we'll talk about the onions in there, besides the wonderful flavor they provide. And it's just so easy. You don't have to change anything about the recipe. I just threw in 20% on the flour weight of crispy fried onions at the end of mixing, and they're just fantastic. And so, Lynn, you've been tasting it there already.
Oh, it's delicious.
Okay.
I just wanted you to finish your presentation before I put in my 2 cents on this.
Yeah, I wanted to then see, but
lucky me, I got brioche. What is brioche, right?
Mm-hmm.
Brioche onion buns. And yes, I could definitely see the difference. It's much airier.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a word. It's so much more volume on the sponge and dough than it is with the straight dough. Okay, I'm not kidding on this one.
And I made
And
these a week ago, if I haven't mentioned that already.
that's pretty good, and it's mold free. I think the onions has something to do with it. So basically, I wanted you to show everyone that, hey, you know, softness and performance of the bread product is not just based on the enzymes or the fat or the formulation. It's actually can be helped by the process as well. Longer hydration, you know, like what Mark said. And obviously in this 2 samples, you're going to see sponge and dough having more advantage over the straight dough. And what you can do with this is instead of just switching over to sponge and dough, you know, understand that if you're going to build a new line, that's your give and take, right? If you build a sponge and dough line, not only do you give it a softer product, but you can actually cut back on your proofing as well.
Yeah.
You know, because
and you know, and if sponge and dough is not a reality, the thing is then you can look to, first of all, ensure proper hydration. That's in the mixing time, and make sure that you don't start high-speed mixing too early. Allow the gluten to hydrate fully. And, you know, even 10 minutes makes a huge difference, right? And there are other technologies out there if you want to visit them. But, you know, for most people, they're a little bit out of their realm of budget and so on. But they do exist. But sometimes time is our best friend, right?
Time and fermentation is our best friend.
And you can and you can add enzymes. You can work with a company like Lallemand to get the enzymatic activity that you need that is lacking from the missing sponge and dough process in that sense, right?
Quick question, Mark. This is the onions on. It looks really nice. Yep. How much onions did you add in the
20% of the flour weight.
Okay, that's quite high. Did it affect the rheology?
No.
Okay.
No, it's very easy to handle. Because this is such a high fat dough as well, it lubricates the gluten really well. So it makes it really easy to process and handle, right? 10% probably would be more like the norm, but I wanted it to visually look really well on camera.
And really good.
And it tastes really good because I've been making
put that on an In-N-Out burger. Or, you know, Five Guys burger. It'll be awesome.
Yeah, we've made some burgers with these at home. Trust me. And one thing I wanted to mention, I almost forgot, is that the other thing I noticed the difference in taste when it comes to the staling process. Like, not only is this one, the one that's stale, dry and stale, there's far less butter flavor. So even with the butter flavor already added, that help boosts it, it's only the sour notes are remaining. And but with the sponge and dough one, the butter flavor is still nice and prominent, still tastes like a traditional, like a classic brioche.
Delicious. Did you put the Zoom Essence flavor in here? Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, it's very natural. All right, so next will be, I am going to talk about the mold issue. So Mark talked about the texture. I'm going to talk about the mold. Okay, so a lot of us bakers, we're so used to just putting in Calpro. Okay, you put in Calpro and you put in mold Calpro, and next thing you know, you're at 0.35% Calpro, and that's the max per FDA regulation. I believe so. And someone has actually asked me, can they go up to 0.5? You know, yeah, I mean, absolutely you can, but your product is going to stink. Okay, it's going to be like smelly. Like if you walk down certain aisles, you can smell that Calpro smell. Okay, so you don't want that. Okay, so what else can you do to not go above 0.35 in Calpro? All right. So first thing you can do is sanitation. All right. So make sure if you have come to these seminars before, if you've seen my live streams before, you know that I am a big proponent of sanitation. And unfortunately, at this volume, if you're a wholesale baker and you're doing like 500 pounds every, 2-3 times an hour, it's time to have a sanitation crew. I know you might be not willing to hire a sanitation crew because it costs more money, but this is what a lot of bakeries do. They take people off the line when they are not packaging or when they're not baking to actually do the actual sanitation, okay? So perhaps look into training these people on the line and maybe promote them into a sanitation role, okay? Because someone has to keep a log on how often the air filters changed, how often the wire racks have been clean, how often have you wiped the top of countertops, even ingredients, the top of ingredient bags and things like that. Someone needs to keep an eye on that. And if you, the owner, or you, the VP of the plant, don't put that kind of responsibility on one of the team members, then it's not going to be taken care of, and you're going to be putting in more and more Calpro. Okay, so sanitation is key. Keeping a team member on a sanitation schedule is key. So do that immediately if you're having a ton of mold issues. And the reason, I love that some bakeries come to me and say, well, I didn't have this issue a year ago. Why am I having this issue? And then I ask them, well, have you increased your business? And like, yeah, we like increased like 3-4 times in our customer business. And that's why the more you bake, the more flour it's in the air, the more it settles down on counters, and you just have to keep up with that. Okay.
And there's very, very true, very powerful. And the other thing I would like to add to that is that before dismissing sanitation as an add-on cost of any kind, be sure you're analyzing your business correctly, because most bakers actually find that the amount of returns that they're getting, if they start classifying them and looking at the cause of the returns, and there's so much that are spoilage and mold issues or things like that, or if their sales are dropping in certain regions where they have long delivery times to get it there, like in the delivery chain, then they start to realize that if their sanitation is improved, if that's part of the solution, that reduces all of those losses. So you actually end up, even by implementing sanitation costs, you actually still make gains. And end up making more money, because then also it improves confidence in your product and more people will buy it. It's always these multiple chain reactions that happen.
Right.
And then everybody's proud of their product. And as you said, when your business grows like that, you have to be aware of how it's changing the environment and how frequently you change. And as you grow, make sure you develop systems. If you're not going to do a full HACCP program, at least have a good routine and system of understanding that this person's job is to do this for the first 7.5 hours, and that 30 minutes of the shift is their job is to clean this instrument or whatever, so that it's understand it's built in and you're not always scrambling from one emergency to the next.
Correct. And to Mark's point, if you're growing, a lot of growing bakeries, eventually you need to get into a production scheduler position where that person schedules the production times for the next couple of days. Okay. And this is what I implemented in a couple of bakeries, is when you talk directly to your production scheduler and you make sure your production scheduler knows that you need to shut down on Wednesdays and you need to shut down on Sundays, then you can schedule the sanitation when you shut down. Okay, so this is really key in terms of adjusting personnel costs and sanitation, how to tuck in sanitation in there so that it benefits everyone without actually shutting down to sanitize. Like, I will never ask you to shut down and sanitize. I will always ask you to sneak sanitation in when there is a break for changeover. Okay, and make sure that those dates are fixed. And if you have more question on why it needs to be fixed, we'll talk about it later. Okay, but it's important that you put sanitation top priority, because that's the next point. Sanitation is going to take care of the air. I know certain bakeries do not have an air or flour reclaim system. And because you don't have a flour reclaim system, a lot of flour goes in your air. What is flour? Flour is food for mold, okay? And with the humid combinations in your bakery, oh my God, that is like a delicious meal for a mold spore all around, right?
Party time sauna.
Yes, yes. Come to this bakery. We have free food and moisture. We'll just reside here forever. Okay. So it's very important that you take care of the air quality. Make sure you filter out the flour particles as much as you can. And I'm a big proponent for flour reclaim systems. All right. Look into that. And it's definitely going to help the moldy issues in your bakeries.
Yeah. And
okay,
if you,
next.
if you see mold building up often on a certain area, let's say on the walls of near a dish area and stuff like that, don't just keep cleaning it with bleach. That's not going to solve the issue, right? That's going to last for a few minutes, a couple of hours maybe, and then it's going to come back again, and within a week or two you're going to have black mold growing there again. You need to solve the issue, the source of where it's coming from. Like Dr. Lin says, the flour dust, right? If you can't put a reclamation system in, figure out a way to manage it. Put in the curtains to keep the flour in an area where it's not going to be subjected to all the humidity and everything.
Correct. So the next point is pH. Do you have proper pH? Because if you remain above 5.5, I believe, your propionic acid, and I'm going to show you a table later on, it's going to dissociate. And once it dissociates, it's no longer functional. And if you give it a longer ferment, it brings down the pH naturally. If you're a straight dough, that's when you need to look into, and I'll talk about it later, addition of vinegars, addition of acids, so to bring the pH down so that your cultured wheat and your Calpro works, okay? So pH needs to be part of your quality protocol. And if you have any questions on that, just go ahead and put it in the Q&A box. Okay, so
and then real quick, if you can reshare your screen, we're not seeing the slides right now.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me do that. It's so weird that we don't have. Okay. Thanks, Joanna. Do you see it now?
Yeah, it looks good.
Great. Okay, so we talked about pH, we talk about inadequate preservative. So sometimes you may start at 1% Calpro, and that's the room you work with. You can go up to 0.35, okay? Cultured wheat, there is no regulation for how much cultured wheat you can use. Sometimes people start at 1, they end at 4-5%, but when you get to 5% for an additive, you gotta question yourself, why are you doing that much? Okay, you not only will you smell that cultured wheat in your final product, it's actually pretty doesn't taste good, to put it in a nice way. So don't go too much on the preservative. I believe that's why I put this as a third point. It's not as important as sanitation, air, and pH. Okay, just look at those 3 points above first before you increase the preservative in the bread. Okay, let's talk about bakeouts. I encourage 80% arrival using the breadometer. And the reason why is because that ensures enough bakeout in the bread. Go to our thermal profiling page and you will see, this is what I call a breadometer, okay? And this is the probe that you put inside the bread like that. and you send this through to the, oops, you send this through the oven, and you measure with your first batch, measure out and determine 80% arrival, which is 20% of the baking time above 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. So with this, I've talked a lot about it in my videos. So if you need more information, as Dr. Lin videos would have these answers, but get yourself one of these nifty thermal logging instrument to help you with your bake. And if it's the middle of a summer and things are taking too long to cool on the cooling line, it is so important to get it up to 20% arrival to get the moisture out so it cools faster. Okay, so you can always manipulate bake outs to control your mold issue. Don't forget packaging. We have special packaging that we have gotten from So Fresh, and that extends your shelf life of your product for at least 10 days. I've seen as much as 20 to 30 days. So that's really important in terms of managing your shelf life, because it's not actually an additive. It's something that's sprayed on in the packaging that prevents mold from, pretty much it like stifles the mold, like kills it. Right.
As you happen to mention So Fresh, I still have some of the So Fresh bags, and I'm going to confirm with them that they're still okay to go ahead and use. I don't remember if you mentioned, I don't think the bags have a shelf life at all. I think the chemical is just.
I don't know if there is a shelf life to the bag. That's a good question.
Because I wanted to do another test with them this summer, like in around mid-July. To do the bakes, so that when it's nice and humid through the summertime, and so that way I would have a time-lapse video and everything done by early September of the I'm going to try and see. Actually, it might be even late September if I try to push 45 days. So we'll see how bad it gets, right? And how much the So Fresh helps keep it up. So I'm going to do comparison of also with and without onions, so we can kind of see some of the difference.
Yeah, take the onion out. It's so good for antimicrobial stuff.
Yep.
And then we'll do a real comparison.
Yep.
So my next point is water activity. Okay, so breads are usually about 0.9. You aren't going to change that significantly, whatever you do. But you will see a difference between your sugared breads and your non-sugared breads. Your sugared breads remaining mold-free longer than your non-sugared breads. So that's why something sweet is going to remain mold-free without something that doesn't have sugar. Okay, so the effect there is water activity. So go to a water activity to learn more about what is going on behind sugared and non-sugared breads.
And Bill has joined us for the seminar from So Fresh, and he said there is no shelf life on the bags. As long as they're kept cool and dry, they're fine.
Oh, thanks, Bill. That's awesome. So I can not worried about anything expiring on me. That's a great baker's toolkit. One more thing is packaging warm. And a lot of bakers do this in the summertime because they just can't get the internal temps low enough. Okay. So like I said, drive out the moisture as much as you can in the oven, making sure that your arrival is 80, 79, 78%. Okay. The more you put it above 200 degrees Fahrenheit, the more moisture you drive out. The more moisture you drive out, the faster it cools on a cooling line. Okay. Because water is a great insulator. And the more you drive it out, the faster it cools, okay? So other than slowing down the line, you can always bake more. When you bake more, you can actually reduce the cooling time by, 2 to 3 minutes. So look into that. You don't want to package it warm, because once the water releases from the bread, it's free water. It's free water. It helps microbial growth. And it's another question for Bill too. Maybe he can type it out. Can people actually package warm with your product? You know, will it affect the microbial activity of, you know, the antimicrobial function of the package? So that's another concern of mine. Okay.
Yes, it works better.
Oh, it works better. Okay, so everyone just have a separate conversation with Bill, because I'm not the expert, obviously. Yeah, Bill, go ahead. Yeah, Bill, go ahead and put your email on there so that people can reach out to you. Hey, who doesn't want to package warm? You know.
Joanna has shared the website. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, why doesn't my Calpro work? This is a very, very common question. Okay, firstly, you need to confirm that you are using the right level. Okay, you can go up to 0.35, and this is all on the Calpro page. So go visit the Calpro page to understand where is this ingredient from, how to use it, what is this FDA regulation. Okay, next thing you need to do is make sure you confirm the dough pH, and better pH is below 5.5. And the reason why I put better is because a lot of the gluten-free bakers on here works with better doughs. Okay. Yeah. And that itself, oh my gosh, moles just love gluten-free bread because it's so high in moisture, right? So the water activity is so high, you know. So we just need to make sure you manipulate the pH to get it below 5.5. All right. So how do you do that? Well, if you've never done pH before, go to our pH page. We will tell you how to exactly get what equipment to measure pH. All right. So hopefully tomorrow you're going to go down the road and just buy a pH meter and start measuring a pH. Okay. Reduce and eliminate contact points. All right. So that's fine when you are a artisan baker, that you touch the bread at every point you possibly can. But when you're a wholesale and industrial baker, try to leave the bread alone, like not touch it too often. It's going to get to a point where you are going to go from manual depan to automatic depan. Okay, to use some kind of suction tool to automatically get the bread out of the tins. Okay. So that's important. Actually, that particular step is going to help you prevent molding on your bread, because the machine is doing the touch point, not your fingers. Okay. What else? From the cooling tower to actually slicing and packaging. So in smaller scale bakers, like artisan bakeries, after it's cooled on the shelf, you take it from the shelf, you slice it, and then you bag it. That's like 3.3 touch points, right? And when you scale up, that's an automatic, no touch point kind of method. So you actually go from, you know, touching it 3 times to touching it 0. Okay, I want you to understand that as well. And as you scale up, you need to look into a cooling conveyor belt that helps you cool your bread, because those wire racks that you actually use physically, yeah, when was the last time you cleaned that? Like, do you remember cleaning that? Yeah, I don't know any bakers who actually spray it down and sanitize it every day. It's not possible to keep up. The work hours, the workers' hours that you put in there to try to sanitize those wire racks, it's going to cost you a fortune. And if you do the calculation, it's cheaper for you to put in a cooling system with a self-sanitation belt that does that for you automatically. So that issue is such a huge issue in shelf life. I have seen an actual artisan baker scale up with hundreds of cooling racks. I'm like, oh, I was like, that's what your problem is. Cooling racks are your problem. Okay, so
there are like gigantic dishwashing machines that you can run the cooling racks through, but there again, you have to have the space for that.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's
So
the other, usually when an artist,
when your cooling area is getting more than 20 cooling racks, that's when you need to think up an upscale. Because that's when the mold issues are going to be beyond your capacity to handle it on a daily, it's a daily challenge to try to sanitize all those things. So reduce and eliminate contact points. Confirm if any sodium bicarb usage, and too much usage of this would actually result in more mold issues. Okay, and is Calpro safe? Is it safe? I actually created a Ask Dr. Lin video on whether Calpro is safe, and through our research, we found that yes, it is safe based on FDA's regulation of its usage below that level. Okay, so we have also found about the mice study and all that stuff. We've gone in depth into understanding what is being presented, and we have concluded that Calpro is absolutely safe. So just in case you're wondering. All right.
calcium is used as the carrier for the propionic acid, correct?
Correct.
And so it's just calcium as a mineral.
Correct.
And
yes. So basically it breaks down in your body into calcium and propionic acid, and propionic acid is being excreted and calcium is being kept.
Yeah.
Right? So
and the propionic acid is from originally was from a natural source. It's from a fruit of some kind. I can't remember now which one. But it's actually a fruit acid that is now they chemically manufacture it for Calpro. But it has the same constituents.
All right. So so this slide pretty much tells you what you can do if Calpro is a problem. Basically, you need to reduce the dough pH. First thing you want to do is reduce the dough pH. You can do this through vinegar. You can do this through acids. Okay, and that's what prune juice and raisin paste concentrates do for you too. It lowers down the pH. You can also use corn syrup products and also sourdough powder. We know that people like Erex with their Erex liquid sour K has a sourdough component to it, so you can use that. And onion is also a good source. Actually, let's talk about the proponents that disrupt the cell, not manipulate the pH, right? So what I'm talking about here is when your Calpro don't work, look at the pH and look at the thing that disrupt the cells. Okay, so cinnamon, clove, onions, all natural remedies disrupt the cells. Okay, cultured whey, cultured wheat, netamycin. Okay, they all disrupt the cell. So you put these two together, you get a wonderful product. All right, that will be shelf stable forever. However, just know that because these are natural remedies, you're going to have a cinnamon flavor, you are going to have a clove flavor, and you're going to have an onion flavor. So those are things that you have to develop around. Okay, not the easiest, but can be done. Okay, so this particular slide, I like to show it because it was shared to me by Luke from Lalaman, and he shows pretty much, look at pH 3, pH 4, pH 5, pH 6, and pH 7, right? So pH 3, everything is like at 90% viable, right? It's functioning, all these acids, especially propionic acid. pH 4, it's less functional. pH 5, almost everything dissociate except for the methyl, ethyl, and propylparabenes. That's why they're so effective. All right. And I know bakers aren't going to go there, so I'm just showing the difference. Okay. If you want to really have a shelf stable product that is going to be mold free for years, you can look into ethyl and propylparabenes. But
you can send brioche buns to the space station.
There you go.
Or Mars.
Or astronauts. Okay. So with the difference between pH 5 and 6, you see that's a huge drop, right, in propionic acid from 41% undissociated to 6.6% undissociated. So at pH 7, which is neutral, like if you do a straight dough, no time, no pre-prevent, all processed within 90 minutes, you're going to get there at pH 6 to 7. Okay, so that's where your problem is with straight doughs. You aren't going to have a lot of fermentation. You're not going to have a lot of acids, and therefore your propionic acid is going to dissociate. So it's not effective at all. Like calcium pro is not effective at all at pH 6. Okay, so that's why your pH meter is so important. Okay, to understand where your pH is. So if you keep adding Calpro and your pH is 5.7, 5.8, guess what happens, people? You're just like throwing Calpro out the window, just like throwing it like, bye money, see you later. So make sure that you do figure out what your pH is before you add in more Calpro, before you add in more cultured wheat, okay? Because these acids, they're not gonna function at a higher pH. Okay. Let's look at mold prevention further. So what I talked about is lower the pH. Items with sugar work better because it lowers the water activity a tad bit. Storage temperature, don't give it fluctuation in temperature. Keep it at room temperature all the time. Actually, room temperature gives better keeping than freezer temperatures, because when you put freezer and your distribution channels, keep it frozen, you are going to be assured that not all of them are going to freeze it. Okay, it's going to give you a huge fluctuation in a freeze thaw cycle. So the freeze thaw cycle is so detrimental to staling.
And especially if besides mold, if it thaws too much and starts to reach refrigeration temperature, it starts to accelerate the staling process as well. Correct.
Yep. And let's see. So packaging, that's MAP. All right. But MAP pretty much requires a whole set of equipment altogether. So we talk about a special kind of packaging from So Fresh today. So that's going to help you naturally increase your shelf life. Okay.
That's going to be the new MP.
Oh, yeah.
Modified packaging, no atmosphere.
That's a good one, Mark. That's a good one. Okay.
Well, confuse the Canadians and the British, with the member of parliament thing. Right?
Okay, so you want to try to target natural mold-free as much as you can. I think you can. I think if you work like Intel, where they have like hazmat suits and everybody wears protective gear and everything is clean and sterile, you can be actually naturally mold-free. But honestly, no bakery is going to do that. So it's a possibility. I just wanted to put it out there. Controlled cooling, you need to drive out the moisture as much as you can so that you can cool faster and cool it into a controlled environment where your cooling system or your wire racks are not in front of a fan. Okay, your wire racks need to be in front of a fan blower that has HEPA filter, if that makes sense. Okay, so a control environment that is drier and is lower in relative humidity. So you can control the temperature, relative humidity with air filters as well. So these two things are really important in your environment for cooling. Clean surfaces and air. If you're dealing with wire racks and you don't have the capax to change, look into a system from ChemAx, because ChemAx has special dunk temps that you can dunk your racks in. So it cuts down on a lot. Yeah, it cuts down on a lot of your washing and sanitization time. Joanna, if you could put Gary's information from ChemAx, that would be great as well. Okay. Exposure. It's so important. Like, I've seen this in so many bakeries. They have a baking crew separate from a packaging crew. And sometimes the packaging crew comes in like 4 hours after the first product comes out of the oven. This 4 hours that your bread is sitting on the shelf that's not sanitized is just going to collect mold spores. Okay. So basically what you need to do is make sure that your packaging crew come in no more than 1 hour after your first product is baked. Okay. So if you're a growing baker, you'll be like, Lynn, that's no way I can do that. My cost for labor is going to go up the roof, right? So what you need to do is you need to get that production planner in, because you're growing. You need to invest in your growth. Get the production planner in and start planning things out. Because what you need to do is to really understand this issue. The more exposure you give it, the less the more mold spores you get in. And the more mold spores you get in, the more it is difficult to control. Okay. And I always like to advocate gloves. Everybody, like after the oven, after the kill step stage, need to wear gloves, like that whole area. I don't care who you are, your sanitization crew, you're the QA crew, you need to wear gloves, because you're going to accidentally touch the surface. You're going to accidentally touch racks and product. Like that is not just unsanitary, that's just really gross. Okay, so make sure
we've heard so much over the past year about PPE, you know, personal protective equipment. And the protective is not only, it's personal because it's on your person. And it's not only to protect you, but it's also to protect others, right? And you always have to be aware of those things, right? That it's key that, you know, you are the sometimes the dirt that you need to make sure that
actually you're like 100% of the dirt sometimes.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, but you know, at the same time, you don't want to drive through the Tim Hortons and get your sandwich made by the guy who just handed the guy in front of you cash, right, with his gloves on, right? So I've seen that happen too. They don't understand why they're wearing the gloves. But lately, I have to say, maybe that's awareness from the pandemic, but I've seen in so many places where gloves are required for food prep and everything else like that. I've seen really good habits. I've seen everywhere we've gone recently. It's been really great.
I am so happy. Yeah. Okay, so Mark, you can join me in this slide. I don't mind your expertise here. But improper hydration causes not enough gelatinization of the starch.
Yeah.
And because of that, you're going to get increased starch retrogradation. But basically what Mark showed with the straight dough and sponge and dough is, you know, the ability to hydrate better gives you better volume, gives you a softer product. So do you have anything else to add
it keeps the gluten protein soft as well with that too at the same time, right?
Correct.
But yeah, it's proper hydration is so key that way. Yeah, and bake out, as you pointed out, if you don't hit that 80% bake out in, you know, like in 20% of the time, as you were talking about earlier, you end up really drying the product out before you start to get enough of the moisture driven off, just to hit temperature, right? So it's very slow, because then you're having to slow the whole line down and everything else, right? So it's important to reach bake out in the correct time, and get everything baked out properly. Even when I bake breads at home, I'm always with a thermometer. I'm always checking, right? I have to buy myself one of those for the thermal profiling. I like using that kind of technology, and I just use a wireless probe right now, and it's just so that I can see when it's baked, right, when it's done, right. That's to make sure that I don't bake too long either. Right? Lack of enzymes. that's going back to also working with your supplier, your enzyme supplier, as well as your flour supplier. Make sure that you have information from your C of A's so that you know what the falling number is. And the falling number is the natural enzyme activity that you already have in the flour. So if the falling number is too high, then you need to add additional enzymes to ensure that you're getting good activity for that. And improper mixing is a problem. And that's
Wait, before you go on, I just want to do a shout out.
Yeah,
If you need
please.
enzymes for your shelf life, check out our sponsors. The sponsors that we have for enzymes are Erex,
Oh, yes.
J&K Ingredients, and Lalaman. So check them out on our website. It's on our sponsor showcase, and reach out to them if you need softening enzymes. Okay, go ahead with the mixing part.
Yeah, improper mixing. I mean, gluten development, we all know, is important to get good volume, etc. But if it's not thoroughly mixed through or completely overmixed, then you're going to get these very hard crumbs after a very short period of time. Because insufficient mixing is insufficient hydration. Again, it's that kind of goes together, and over mixing or mixing to getting the dough too hot so that the fermentation is too fast, and other problems like that. It's a conversation I was in the other day. Is like, the thing about breads is they are such simple composition of ingredients. When you start with a typical sourdough bread, let's say, you're really just starting with flour, salt, water. That's it. And the yeast is naturally occurring in the air and in the water. So, but it's like a complex math formula. If you take one of those brackets in the math formula and move it somewhere else in the formula, it completely changes everything. And it's like that with baking. It's not just the ingredients, it's the whole process, everything that you're managing all the way along, all of the different processing steps. And so improper mixing is very important with this as well.
That's great.
And specific volume. If you monitor your specific volume, then you'll know you're getting the right amount of oven spring and expansion from your dough, whether it be fermentation related or mixing related or other things, but you can spot it with specific volume right away. And what is specific volume? Quite simply put, is that it's the volume of the bread divided by its weight, essentially. Or no, sorry, the weight divided by the volume. So it's the volume divided by its weight. I had it right the first time. Yeah.
Volume by weight. That's correct.
It's how many grams per cubic centimeter, or how many grams per 100 cubic centimeters is what we tend to use a lot.
Yeah. It's on our BAKERpedia page, so go there.
And so, specific volumes can be done quite simply. Is using rapeseed displacement. There are laboratory apparatuses for this that are, I find them a bit dangerous, but they work, right? It's just that you have to swing this great big thing up, and as long as nobody's walking by, you don't want to hit them in the head or something, right? But you can even take a volume of a known quantity. So if you know your breads are usually going to be around, say, 2.5 liters in volume, then you get a container that is, say, something like 6 or 8 liters in volume, and you put your bread loaf in there, and you pour the rapeseeds in, and fill it level to the top. And then you measure how much in volume of rapeseeds fit in there. So now you take the loaf of bread out and you pour those rapeseeds into a graduated measuring glass, where you can see how many cc's. So if it reads 2,400 cc's and you panned at the same weight, and it weighs the target weight, and 2,400 is your target, Bob's your uncle, as we say, right? But that gives you then that if it's a 800-gram loaf and it's 2400 cc, well, it's 30 grams per 100 cc. Then you know that, right? And so that is then your target specific volume. And that's a very simplistic way of doing it. There are beautiful pieces of equipment out there for analysis and detail analysis if you like toys like I do.
Those are so expensive, though.
Yeah, they are very expensive.
Yeah.
They are incredibly fast for research purposes.
Yeah.
They are amazing. They're so fast. They're so helpful. I know a number of companies, some of the millers, they use them in their quality assurance labs as well for the volume checks. And it's basically a piece of equipment that has a platform where you can mount the bread or the muffin or whatever on it. And this, we're talking about breads, and it spins around, and then a laser measures its about 1 or 2 millimeters at a time, whatever you set it at. And so it measures it very precisely. It weighs it for you. It does all the calculations. It captures a 3-dimensional image. You can look at the symmetry size by size all the way along the loaf. So for research stuff, it's phenomenal. It was like one of my favorite things. Right? So I used it a lot, as you can tell.
Yeah. All right. So thanks, Mark. We are coming to the end of our seminar. We'd like to do a shout out to Zoom Essence and Top Taste for providing us these delicious items so that we can make delicious onion and brioche buns that will last probably 2 weeks. We just
and
need
the flavor lasts too. It's really nice. I just want to, in that shout out with Zoom, just to not forget to add that the nice thing about their flavors that I find is that there is little to no bake out loss. I find so often, especially with alcohol-based flavors, a lot of the flavor, probably almost 50% of it, gets flashed off in the baking. So I always find myself, when I get samples from certain, from liquid flavors for bread doughs or things, I usually have to increase it from the recommended dose. Otherwise, we don't get the flavor. And with Zoom, everything's been bang on, right? It's been beautiful.
That's true.